You're listening to a Thames Estuary Partnership podcast, celebrating London's famous tidal river. We hope you enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Eve Sanders, and welcome back to Talk of the Thames. Now, today is a rather special episode as it was recorded on site during one of the Estuary Edges fish surveys back in August. Now, what are the estuary edges? I hear you cry. Well, allow me to explain. So, estuary edges are intertidal reed beds and habitat which has been implemented by waterside developers along the Thames. It's a series of guidance which explains in detail how to create these sites and the ways in which they can benefit both people and wildlife. Over the last 3 years, it's been my job to go and survey these sites and to get a better picture of how they're functioning for biodiversity. Now, the following is a recording of us at Point Wharf Estuary Edge site, which is positioned just outside of the O2 Arena. We were setting and hauling in the seine nets, and we also laid some fyke nets on the intertidal terraces. So a seine net, essentially you put it in the water and it's got a weighted bottom to it, and you walk in a big circle, or you use a boat if you're perhaps a little deeper, and you sort of swoop the net in and then you haul it onto the shore and look at your catch. Whereas a fyke net is more of a funnel with big wings either side. So when the tide comes in, the fish get trapped essentially in the end of these fyke nets, and then you recover the nets at low tide again. But no fish are harmed in this process. They're all placed in aerated buckets, and once processed are quickly put back into the Thames. Come with us on our surveying journey at Point Wharf.
We've got something in there. It's difficult when it's surging like that with the... Oh, we've got an eel.
So we've hauled in the final seine net, and we're now we have the fish in a bucket and ready to process. So what we'll do is we'll take the fish out one at a time, check them over, measure them and record this information. The fish are in aerated buckets so they can breathe, and they get released shortly after, so no fish are harmed in the process.
Now, what have we got here? Oh, now it's in some freshwater fish, an eel, a stickleback, a bass, a nice bass. Well, there's a good mix for you.
How old is that bass? It's quite big.
That's last year's. You can just hold that a minute. I'll get in there. These are tiny little roach or dace. That is definitely a little bass. That's another tiny bass.
Is that European bass?
Oh yeah. Labras. What I've demonstrated is the high freshwater find at the moment. You wouldn't have seen those little freshwater dace here normally in August. That's great.
Nice.
We'll do a second one straight away. Is that okay? A couple of things about that catch. I think that's a bit of a surprise. It's last year's bass. They will come up this far, but it's quite brackish for them. I wouldn't expect it to come up this far under these conditions. But the small bass, the classic, is at least two different size basses there. Now they're both 0+. But what we now know is that bass are spawning at slightly different times in slightly different places in the southern North Sea and off the French coast. So they're taking different times to get here. So what we see classically with bass is multiple groups or modes in the evidence. And they'll start in about June, about the smallest as that small one is. But by August you might have seen a third wave, sometimes a fourth. And the latter waves hardly ever get big enough to survive the winter. And similar to Andy before, that the salt marsh is critical in this regard. Because if they can get in there and feed fast and early, it's so warm they'll grow fast. So they'll get big enough to survive the winter. If they don't get the optimal habitat and they're part of one of the later waves of fry, they just die because it gets too cold. Unless they make about 6 or 7 grams in weight, so big, they maybe say 7 or 8 centimetres, they just won't survive the winter because they don't feed in cold water. So the salt marshes habitat is absolutely critical to their survival.
That shows the importance then of the estuary edges site.
Oh, it does, definitely. And also it's also tied in with climate change and with species distributions. Because bass is naturally a warm water species, so they're already on the northern end of their distribution in the southern end of the UK. So if they're going to have a hard winter, it'll knock them out. But if they get a reasonable summer and they get really good habitat, then more of them survive a hard winter. So yes, this habitat's absolutely critical. Just somebody's grabbed the end of that, so go and have a go. So the first batch of fish is just the fish from the little pond on that. We'll call it the third terrace. Call it this one first, second, third, just for this purpose. Yeah. Right. Excuse me.
So if I could just call it pond.
Yeah,
Pond.
Bay 3
Pond
pond
Bay 3.
would be great.
Get out. Another one of these. So we've got both operating.
This is where you realise how bad my thing is.
Really more small fish in there again. Oh no, you see that's definitely a baby common goby. And he is only 15mm long. Tell by the way he's moving, and I can see the melanophores in the body clearly. And you can see a line of darker spots or shades of melanophores down one side of him.
Right. Oh yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah.
We say 15.
So transparent.
Yeah. And there are other tools you can put it in. Biologists have those little jars with a magnifying glass on the top, but I find this, and if it's just a small thing, you've seen these before, you haven't done it, just a simple jam jar. If you haven't got one of those, put your little fish in here and watch them swimming around, because you're better to be able to identify them if you're looking at them like that rather than that.
And then we've got, are you counting shrimp?
No, I'm not counting, I'm just going to say they're common basically. They're
Common shrimp, many.
Yeah, well, there's various species in here. There's something called a euphorsid, which I'm quite familiar with, which is a very small shrimp-like animal. There's some baby crangon. There might be something else as well, but we just say they're present. Anyway, that's the one that's going back, isn't it? That's a 15mm common goby, which again that's what interests me. In my experience, common gobies are coming in from June onwards at about 10mm. So that's only 15. Does that mean that there's another wave of them that's coming? Or does it mean that it's a single wave of them and they've come through later than they would do normally? I'm guessing from its body shape it's a goby again, but it's only 12mm. So it hasn't grown very much at all yet. Which is quite... This magnifying glass on this is actually quite clear, isn't it? I haven't used it quite like this before. It's quite good to see. Now, again, you can see the melanophores on the body. But that one there is a dead common goby at 12mm. So,
Okay.
at least that's my best guess. And what I mean by that is you'd have to take that back into the laboratory under a microscope to be absolutely clear. But given what we expect to see here and what we know about the ecology and the timing of animals coming, that is highly likely to be a common goby. What's more interesting is how small some of them are. Two gobies. One goby at 24 and one at 18. Quite nice little gobies. And I'm calling these all common gobies, but where we are now, we're on the edge of where you might start to see the sand goby. But even at this tiny size, it looks slightly different. It's got a slightly longer face. It tends to be slightly more, the colour, melanophores are not black, they're more orange. So if you've seen a lot of them, you get a good indication. But again, if they're under 2 centimetres in size,
Yeah.
you can't tell. The sand goby wants slightly more salt in the water, so it's a bit fresh for it up here.
Is there a difference in the eyes as well?
Yes,
The
yeah.
common is.
And if you turn them upside down, there's a difference in the Oh, the fins are sort of linked together across the bottom in a different way in the two species. But they overlap heavily at times. Yeah, common goby at 12. And again, small as he is, you can see the colours down the side of the animal. Nothing
The
else
spots.
looks quite like that.
Like freckles.
Yes, like freckles, exactly. Just
They've
like
also got
freckles.
quite red eyes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Can have red eyes at times. But see his behaviours, he wants to sit on the bottom. He will swim up.
Yeah.
But it's not like a bass or something which just stays in mid-water. He wants to go and hide on the bottom. Right, common goby at 26. And now with him, just to show the difference, are two crangon, quite big. So you can see they're not like a shrimp. They don't crawl, they crawl along the bottom, much more flattened. A prawn will swim in mid-water. Prawns and shrimps are often part of the same fishery.
Okay.
The prawns we get in the Thames, the estuarine prawn, can get about so big, about 10 centimetres long. And they're very pretty in an aquarium because they're transparent. You can see all the blood vessels inside them, so that you can see right through them and see all the body organs. Really quite pretty animals. You can see how much life there is in there with the small animals scooting around. They seem to be all crangonists, but much smaller ones. But again, you can see they're not trying to swim in mid-water, they just swim around the bottom all the time.
Oh, there's lots in there.
Yeah, but there's lots of small ones, so they're obviously breeding somewhere, not too far away.
There's a little like woodlouse
Yeah,
thing as well. What's
yeah,
that?
it can be a woodlouse. Or a woodlouse related, it's called a celis, or could be gammarus, one of the two.
They're like small
Yeah.
black dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've picked up a couple of those and then chucked them back
Uh-huh.
on the basis they weren't vertebrates.
That's a little common goby again, 12mm. It's dead. But swimming around actively in there is a sort of laterally compressed shrimp that's buzzing around in the water. Where are you? Where's he gone now? That thing there, that slightly brown thing.
Yeah.
That's a gammarus, which you find in freshwaters. They're very, very common in freshwaters, but they will exist in slightly saline conditions.
Right.
Maybe a different species, but they're very, very common in freshwater reaches.
So not quite estuarine then, more
No.
more rivers and
Yeah, exactly. But you know, there's nothing. They will survive in these conditions.
yeah.
Right. So those are all the fish in that little pond. Andy. So if you draw a line under that, this year's bass fry, and this one is. Oh, he's come round quite nicely. It's 24mm, and the thing to notice with this is he hasn't yet fully scaled. Can you see along the top surface and the ventral surface like a black edge? It's really noticeable when they're smaller than that, and they can sometimes have a pinkish line just behind the head, and you think, what on earth am I looking at? Because it doesn't look like a bass. It's not a bar of silver at all. And again, one reason for looking at them like this is that if he stops moving, you can see he's got two dorsal fins, which means he's a perchid, a member of the perch family. So it can only be the perch, zander, or a bass.
Oh right, okay.
So looking at the body shape and the fin sizes is really important. But he's quite a good example of this. He's nearly fully scaled up, but not quite yet, and he's still got that black edge to him. So if you see from above, the head's quite black.
Yeah.
The tail's quite black. You wouldn't think it's a baby sea bass at all.
So it's lost their markings from the top and bottom.
Now here's a nice thing, because these are two different species that you might think look the same. Ooh, I was saying that. God, now they've got me confused. In the Thames we have a hybrid, called a roach bream hybrid, and I've got one and possibly two here.
Oh really?
Yeah. Roach have a red eye. Bream are deeper in the body. These two could, but one looks like a true bream, and the other one looks roach shaped, but it hasn't got a red eye. So,
Interesting.
So I'm saying the bream is 42 millimetres, and this probably roach bream hybrid is 35. If you look at those two, they've got a slightly different body shape. This one I'm saying is the bream, a true bream. They get very deep body when they get bigger. So
Yeah.
it's already a bit deeper in the body than the other one.
Yeah.
But if that's a true roach, he should have a red eye, and he hasn't. They just have to confuse you, these damn fish. But again, freshwater species, they're at the top end, sorry, the bottom end of their distribution here, because they're starting to hit the salinity. They won't go any further downstream.
So this is as far down as they'll come.
Yeah, on this particular tidal regime. To be another.
Very similar to the last ones.
Yeah, I'm going to put that down as a true roach because it's got a bit of a gleam in its eye, slightly red. So I'm saying roach at 32 millimetre, but it could be again another one of these hybrids. They're really difficult these to. Oh no,
He's not in
here's a
very good
classic.
nick.
No, he's not. Here's an even smaller bass. Hang on a minute. Now that's what I meant. He might not survive, but that's a baby bass. So I mean, it doesn't look like a bass at all.
No.
You see the black edging. It's not quite as prominent as that other one.
But it's got the two dorsal
Yes, you can
fins.
see the two dorsal fins, and he's still pumping, so I'm getting back in some aeration.
Yeah.
These, yes, 20 mil. And he won't have been in very long, and he's probably no more than, he's probably certainly no more than 3 months old. Let's just see. We'll just hold the net so I don't lose the eel, otherwise we'll be trying to catch him all day. Go on, Mr. Bass, you'll just about do it.
Oh,
Yeah. 145. Let's turn him upside. Set him up the right way.
Beauty.
He's sticking his fins out because he's annoyed with us.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
wow.
That's
How old is
last
that
year's.
chap?
That's last year's. Again, they don't come too far into the estuary. They'll come to Abbey Wood and Woolwich a lot. And I'm surprised to see him quite this far up, but it's not horribly unusual. But it does show you, even a second year bass will come into 2 parts per 1,000, very low salinity area. Obviously in very good condition, feeding on all the small fish you can get hold of. Is that okay?
He looks in good nick as well.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? Yeah. Shall I put him back?
What's that?
But I knew I wouldn't be able to encourage him into the. I thought that was. I'm not going to put him in too much water because he'll start climbing out.
Go on.
But he's okay to do this with. Go on, that's it.
Oh, my favourite.
Again, eels are good because if you put them into a V shape, they tend to, after moving around a bit, they tend to just lie down flat. So, yes, one.
This
Go
is
on,
the
just lie
European.
down. Yes, oh yeah. 125, I'm calling that. Oh, look at the boat going up the river now. There's a sight.
Wow.
Look at that. Want to turn around the other way, go around the other way. That's it, that's it, that's it, that's it. Just lie down a minute. Thank you. Yes, 125, I'm calling that.
125.
So, that is probably last year's Elva. So rather like the bass, he's in his second year in the river. Good little Elva. Or yellow eel as he is properly now. Oh, we've got a ladybird on me. But again, this is such an easy way to process them rather than to try and stick him on a measuring board where he flaps all over the place trying to hold him. So much easier. I found this before, when you get huge volumes of debris, you don't catch very many fish. Oh, yes. Oh, no. That is a true dace. There are little fish stuck in the rubbish, not many. It's difficult. There could be tiny fries stuck in here, of course. I shouldn't be doing this without my gloves on, it's a bit silly. Gammas.
So this is our third seine net, and we haven't been so lucky with fish, but we have caught quite a horrendous amount of plastic and a syringe, lolly sticks, a tennis ball, some old chocolate wrappers, It's a little bit sad.
You can also say that the seine netting is difficult because it's so choppy,
Yeah.
which is often to do with the number of boats passing us here.
It's interesting the amount of debris in this third net is so much greater than the first net.
Because of the tide.
The tide's lifting it up and moving it around. Exactly. Oh, well, that's good. Didn't catch many fish, but again, we've got what looks like a true roach and a true dace this time.
Special thanks to fisheries expert Steve Colclough, who was leading the surveys today. We always have a lot of fun out on the survey days, and it never fails to impress me the sheer diversity of life at these sites. It's not just fish, but when you're there on site for the day, you see such a range of birds and invertebrates using the sites. It's lovely, and all of this builds towards the fact that the Thames is really thriving and full of life. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Talk of the Thames and feel inspired to get out and look for these wildlife hotspots. Hopefully it's given you a little more appreciation for the species hiding beneath the city. Until next month, take care. Bye-bye.